biography, you have a lovely description of Tarantella, in which you say that it's like the body is always smiling. I just think that's such a lovely way of putting it. And of course, the audience is always smiling also. However, the body may be smiling, but inside you're absolutely exploding. So let's talk just a little bit about stamina, developing stamina, how you prepare for something like this, a gut buster like this.
Well, there is only one way to prepare for it, and that is to take it deeply, deeply serious. And the way I learned it, it was bit by bit by bit, and then put it back all together. And when I did put it all together finally, I thought I would die.
You had a rude surprise.
It
yes.
was shocking.
Yeah.
So it taught me an enormous lesson about how to approach a work like that. And it's such an oddity in that you can get in great shape before a season with classes and rehearsals. But stage dancing is something else again.
Sure.
It takes that much more out of you, and you are relating to an audience. You are having this conversation, and you are a single focus. So if you are not prepared, every step in this is quick, sharp, jumping, elongating. It's a series of simplicities. But the juxtaposition of all of those simplicities make the apparent complexity. But when you are first learning it, it's all complexity.
Yeah.
And again, the idea is to get that musical structure in your head so that you can stop thinking. This is not a ballet that you can stop and think about.
I'm sure there's no time.
There is no meditative moment.
Yes, yes. Is there
say.
any moment where there's even a bit of rest in almost every ballet that Balanchine did? He gave the principals, one or two walking steps or something where you could just at least, well, a little tiny bit of downtime. I mean, 2-3 seconds.
Well, I think the only downtime is when you're off stage.
Yeah.
But when you're off stage, you're doubled over.
Yeah, yeah. Now, when you prepared for this, did you do it all full out, or I'm sure you danced full out, but what I mean is, was there a sort of a pacing idea? Or was it all just hot off the mark?
No. I was not a pacer.
Yeah, no, I didn't think you were. You just threw yourself into it, right?
I just love that to take a stage.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just that you're stepping on the stage, but you have to command. You have to command the stage.
And win over the audience. And play to the audience. And play to your partner. Now, I interviewed Patty McBride, actually, about this ballet as well. And she talked about the rapport that was so important. She said, we really looked at each other, and it helped us both so much because it was obviously so difficult, but the play between the two of you was like an energizing thing.
It was terrific to dance with Patty, no matter what it was, but certainly Tarantella. And we would start off stage. As soon as those first notes were going, we'd look in each other's eyes and grin and laugh and say,
sweet.
Here we go, I'll see you out there. And then we just took the stage.
Yeah.
And Patty was that kind of dancer who could make it all look so easy.
Oh, I know.
It drove
just
me
amazing.
crazy.
Yeah. I hardly see a muscle move.
Oh,
yeah.
and it took me 2 hours to warm up, and it would take her about 20 minutes.
I know, it's not fair.
Not
and
fair.
She had these wonderful sort of silken movements. They just kind of, it always looked natural.
Yeah, it all looked easy. It all blended.
Yeah.
The way Balanchine described it, making the difficult look easy.
Yeah.
And she did all the time. She was an absolute delight to work with because we had established such a rapport that we began to rely on each other.
Yeah.
And as you began to rely on each other, you began to play with that reliance. And that's really part of the spirit of what Tarantella is all about. It's that connection and eye contact, of course. For me, I just loved it and adored it. It was always disconcerting to be dancing with somebody who wouldn't look at you and would be looking over you or past you or whatever.
Always inhibited in some way about just giving.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
To have the confidence to absolutely show everything,
yes.
to basically bare yourself.
Yeah.
And I think dancing also, when you see it enough, you begin to know the person, the real person, how they work, how they function, what their temperament is, what their emotional levels are like, and all of those things. And we are human beings like everybody else, but we have other demand.
I would say so, yes. Well, tell me a little bit about the history. In other words, working with Balanchine on this ballet. I understand in the beginning he perhaps had in mind a few core members to kind of give you just a little more rest.
Yes, he did. And he actually, if I remember correctly, was going to use Villella Verdi. She had a foot problem, so of course there was Patty. And Patty, of course, made it absolutely, totally her own. And he did talk about having some core relief, if you will, within it. But I think he just wanted to see if we could do it.
Yes, if it would kill you or you'd survive. And you said that he put it together bit by bit.
Yes.
And you didn't really know, as often happens with him, what the whole thing was going to actually really look like, because it was done here and there.
Yeah, and sometimes he would work not in order. You know, he had this very funny phraseology. He said, well, you know, sometimes I like to start with the last part because then you know where you're going.
Yes.
And, you know, his logic was illogical to mere mortals.
And also sometimes he was sort of putting it on. It sounded good. I think he did that with the press a little bit.
Well,
and then sometimes people would take every word seriously and literally, and of course he was just kind of, you know, saying something kind of whimsical that may or may not have been true. And so then you said, you know, finally at one point you just said, okay, let's see the whole thing. But in your book you say it was something like a day or two before the premiere. I mean, really? Was that close to going?
Yeah.
When you finally put it all together?
Yeah.
Good God.
It was scary.
So you didn't have 3 weeks or 3 months to do it every day?
No.
Well, it's interesting. I think people don't always know how kind of, it's not really exactly lackadaisical, but how unstructured things are in a ballet company, especially with somebody of the confidence of Balanchine. He could do that. He could take you right to the precipice.
Exactly.
At the last minute.
And as a director, I know that I need very quick, sharp, smart minds. And you cannot be dumb in a Balanchine ballet because you won't get it. You
No,
just
I know. It's
won't
such a
get
good
it.
point. It's so much more than mastering the steps.
Yeah.
It's a big mental.
And also to prepare, absolutely to prepare to do all of these basic passes, arabesques, simple stabs that he made look so unusual. As I said earlier, the way he juxtaposed all of those things, it always looked fresh, new, inventive, as though you'd never seen anything like that before. And again, when you break it down, it's a series of simplicities.
I think it's interesting that Gottschalk was an American. People talk often about Balanchine creating an American style of dancing. But some of the composers, the American composers he used, like Charles Ives, are quite unusual. Sousa, unusual to do. And I think when people talk about Balanchine's Americanism, they think of the reductive technique, the streamline technique, the no costumes, the Stravinsky and so on. But the American composers, he did ballets too, they're all quite, shall we say, embellished technique, costumes. It's not what the history books think of as his American neoclassicism. It's kind of interesting. Let's talk a little bit about the rhythm. What he did with the rhythm, how he took rhythms and set steps to them, against them, between this and that. And you were also saying earlier that there's a basic drive there that keeps you going, but the complexities, the choices he made about rhythms.
Well, he heard everything, obviously, and heard it in such a fine way. So the idea of just having underlying rhythm as the basis of it would not work for him. He would find all the nooks and crannies within the score itself, within the architecture of the score. And he would then embellish upon the embellishments. And when you see the footwork that the lady is doing,
oh yes,
it's
and out
just
and knees
and going from there to there and pointing down, pulling up, all of the levels, out, in, over, up. It's just phenomenal, and it all flows so beautifully. It's astounding. This Lincoln Kirstein once said he thought this was one of Balanchine's greatest works, and I found that extraordinarily amusing, thinking of certainly the Agons, the Symphony in Three Movements, and the Stravinsky violin concertos. But I think obviously Lincoln understood the
it's
magic.
pure delight.
It is pure delight.
It's not a, quote, serious work. On the other hand, it's very serious and makes very serious demands on dancers.
It sure does.
And it's also so unusual. For example, there's no partnering in it. Now, how many pas de deux are there where there's no partnering?
I feel blessed that there was no partner in
I'm
it and no lifts.
I'm sure.
Because to add that
Yes.
to the responsibilities already available would have been just the last straw.
You made a very interesting point in your book talking about the technique of Tarantella. The man, of course, has loads and loads of jumps. And one of the things you said was that, but they were often very fast, so there was no time to prepare. So that the landing was, in effect, the preparation for the next. I thought that was an extremely interesting pointer. There's a couple of other little nuggets you'd like to share.
The plie is incredibly important in anything and everything that we do. Of course, the Russian style is a deeper, heavier.
You sit there for a while, too, sometimes.
And you pose, you almost stop. But that's not Balanchine, and it's like Bournonville. The plie is not to land. The plie is the beginning for the next step. It's the continuity. It's what connects it together. It's also what allows you the speed. If you don't have that quickness in the plie, speed will not be your forte. You really have to understand this kind of thing. And it's a very simple exercise with the foot, just doing this. And I would do that endlessly, just to have the power to create the speed as well.
Well, what's unusual, though, is it's the speed and the high jumps. They often are not combined. Very often when you do high jumps, you have a little more time to come, to land, to prepare. But with this, not at all.
No, and a normal male variation will be 3 sets of this.
Something on the diagonal, right? Yes.
You'd have an opening phrase, you'd have a second phrase, you had a third phrase, and between each, you would do 3 steps and walk around the 4th step. 3 steps, walk on the 4th step. 3 steps, walk on the 4th step, and then finish. So it's a very, very different approach when you are not driving all the time.
Well, there's some interesting arm movements also for the man, and that thing with the windmill sort of, that's so effective. And today's dancer delayed it just slightly. I mean, that was I remember you were doing it that way too. I mean, Balanchine asked for that slight,
Well, he just showed it.
yeah,
Didn't talk about it, just showed it, and you had to get it. You had to figure it out. Well, oh, now I see what he's doing. Oh yeah, he wants to emphasize this. Now he's made that statement. Let him double up on it, and
that's
continue.
hard to do also with your arms extended.
It is.
And I know you also delayed some of the jumps, just a little bit.
Well, again, that's a phrasing idea.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's also getting to know yourself and being aware of the top of the jump and arriving at the top of the jump a little bit early so you could sustain the height
Yeah.
of the jump. And it gives the impression of almost stopping in the air. And that again is part of this plie business. And
Well,
getting
understanding the moment. I mean, understanding the
absolutely.
climax.
Absolutely.
And making it show. I mean, probably other people jump high, but they weren't able to have that split-second photo at the top there. Whose idea? Well, undoubtedly they're all Balanchine's idea, but that crouching run that you used to do, I just loved that. When you were way down, practically going off the stage, and you were so low, and it was just so effective. And with the arm high, oh, this is wonderful.
Well, I think that came from my childhood, and I think it came from chasing each other as kids. You know, we were just street kids, and we bicycled and ran. That's
Yeah.
all we ever did.
Yeah.
And you got to know how to run. And
Yeah, but a lot of people run standing tall, but this one, your exits were often so dynamic because you were so low. It was really great. So now you've learned the ballet, you've performed the ballet, and everybody loves it, but you originated the ballet at City Center. Then you moved to the State Theater, and I imagine it was almost another ballet with twice the size.
Oh, and I can't tell you how grateful I was to have a larger stage. Now that sounds like a dichotomy, but it's not. The idea is, once you get that momentum going, now you've got it going. If you have a small stage, you get the momentum going, and then you got to pull it back a little bit.
I think they had to do that a bit today. They didn't have quite as much space as they perhaps would have liked.
Yeah, and we are used to doing this on
Bigger, yeah.
a ballet opera house size stage, and especially the depth is always a complication, and for the guy when he's going around like this, to have depth is a big help, because you don't have to dance so much on an angle. I used to do a lot of orchestra work. I'd be invited by a symphony orchestra, the Philharmonic, the this, the that, or the other. And of course the orchestra would be on stage, which meant that you had about 12 feet
Oh, yes.
and to do a circle of jumps like that in a 12-foot depth is...
You have to, the
it's
curve is so sharp.
Oh, but I had done it so long, and I knew it so well, that I could get half an inch away from the edge of the stage and half an inch away from the musicians. So I was doing this with the New York Philharmonic, and during a break in the rehearsal, a gentleman came over who was the leading cellist, and he was sitting in the first row, and I would fly by him with an inch to spare. And he said to me, Mr. Villella, he said, please don't come so close. It's a Stradivarius.
Well, these are some of the tricks of the trade. Well, I think the idea that it's a smiling ballet is just charming, and thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.